personal injury attorney in Arizona. This video you may find helpful to you. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to not only answer some online questions, which may be relevant to what you're asking, but in addition, he's agreed to answer your questions directly. If you have a question for him, all you need to do is post this down in the comment section below, and he will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours with his response. Obviously, if you have a more pressing of an issue, feel free to reach out to John directly. His contact information is in the content section below. With that said, John, let's go ahead and go into our first question. First question was, if I get into an accident, who pays for my medical expenses?
Okay, thanks, Ryan. The first question about medical expenses is actually a very common one. Most people who are involved in a serious accident, whether it be a vehicular accident, truck accident, or something at work, will have to deal with medical expenses, and those can really start adding up quickly. Typically, what ultimately will happen is that the adverse party, the party who injured you, so if it's a vehicle accident, the adverse driver's insurance carrier will be the person that will be responsible for your medical expenses. And that's what kind of a personal injury attorney's job is to do, is to work with that adverse insurance carrier and make the demands on them based on your medical expenses. Now, if the accident was your own fault and you were the cause of your own injuries, then you kind of have to rely on your own health insurance, or there is also med pay or medical payments that can provide for you. And that's something that you should have in your insurance policy, in your auto insurance policy at least, is medical payments that can kind of help provide for your medical expenses if the accident ends up being your own fault. But if it's the adverse party's fault, then we go after the adverse insurance carrier for those medical expenses.
Okay. Next question we had is, if I'm in a car accident and my vehicle's has been damaged, am I entitled to a rental car?
Okay, so if your vehicle is damaged after a car accident, a lot of people end up without a mode of transportation to get around, and that's a problem because they have a lot of hospital visits, sometimes other medical providers that they have to get to, sometimes even work. So one thing that's smart to do is to have rental insurance in your own auto insurance policy. So that's something that you can talk to your insurance provider and make sure you get that in there. If you don't, most adverse insurance companies, the party that it's at fault, their insurance carrier will also usually kick in and provide a reasonable amount of time in a rental vehicle. They'll pay for a reasonable amount of time. That can be a very short period of time, though, so you want to make sure that you're contacting an attorney to see what your options are in that circumstance.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. The next question we had was, if I'm in a car accident with another party and that party leaves the scene of the accident before the police arrive, or before I can obtain their information, what should I do?
This actually happens quite often, people that are leaving the scene of an accident after they cause it because they're afraid of the consequences that they may have. Another reason that it's vitally important to look at your insurance policy closely is that if you do not have uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, specifically in this instance uninsured, you may be out of luck in this circumstance. But if you did get that uninsured motorist coverage, which is an option you can have in your insurance policy, and most people do have that, then you can, well, the first thing to do in an accident is to call the police and make sure that they take a report. Try to gather as much evidence as you can, see if there's other witnesses that we can track down this person. Call an attorney who may be able to have some resources of looking up where this person was, if there was any witness statements. But you always have your own insurance policy to fall back on, which is your uninsured motorist policy, which would compensate you in what we call the phantom vehicle type of situation.
Gotcha. Okay. Next question we have is, if I'm involved in an accident with a person that lives in another state, what should I do?
Again, you want to first make sure that you have the police come out to the scene of the accident, because in this kind of circumstance, we have an individual who lives in another state. We want to make sure we have the correct information from them. So we need to get their name, their date of birth, their policy that they have, where they live, address. Those kind of things are important, and the police will take that. And actually, most of the time when there's an auto accident and the police come to the scene, they have an information sheet that they exchange with the parties who have been involved that will list on there the name, address, all the identifying information that you will need. You can then take that sheet and bring it directly to an attorney who will be able to track down that person's insurance coverage, send them a notice, open up a claim for you, and even if it's out of state, get that taken care of. Just of a note, typically you need an attorney that practices in the state where the accident occurred. So if you're in another state, say you're in California and get in an accident, you're going to typically need a California attorney. If you're in Arizona, you need an Arizona attorney. Another attorney in another state can actually handle a claim, but not to the point of actually filing a lawsuit, which,
Gotcha.
So that's how that works.
Okay. All right. And the final question we have is, if I loan my car to a friend and they're in a serious accident, what happens in that scenario?
That's actually something that occurs also from time to time. It's a serious situation where someone has loaned their vehicle out to another party, and that party has gotten into an accident, causing that accident. What you need to be aware of is that your insurance follows the vehicle. So even though you were not driving your vehicle, your insurance policy is going to be up for examination and grabs by the person who, you know, was injured by that.
Okay.
So that's the first method, and then the second method can always go after the policy of the person who was actually driving. So that would be the secondary policy.
Okay. Well, that was the last of the questions. If you've been watching the video, first want to thank you for your time. And obviously, if you have any questions directly, all you have to do is post them to the comments below. John will get back to you as soon as possible. Clearly, if you have an immediate need, just reach out to him directly. John, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
Today we're with John Kelly. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney located in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to answer some questions online that were posted. If you've actually been injured in the Phoenix area or anywhere in Arizona for that matter, feel free to give him a call. He's open to answering any questions you have. And on top of that, he's actually agreed to answer questions below the video. So if you have a question just from watching this video, or if you have been injured, all you need to do is simply post your questions at the bottom of the YouTube video, and John will actually come back and answer those questions directly. So with that said, John, go ahead and ask you a few questions that were posted online. The first one we had was, do cases typically settle, or do they go to trial?
Okay, Ryan, thanks for the introduction. Regarding the question of whether cases typically settle or they go to trial, a very common question that I get in my practice, and the answer may surprise people, that actually I've heard numbers of up to 95 and even higher % of cases actually do settle before they go to trial. there's actually a lot of work that goes into the settlement process, and there's different times during the process where the case may settle. So it may settle right off the bat before a complaint is ever filed. It may settle after a complaint is filed, but before a trial commences. It may settle during arbitration. It may settle, any time in between in the process. There's a discovery process, so there's a lot of time that typically will pass before you get to an actual trial. So I guess the numbers are very high percentage of those cases do settle, and usually that's a good thing for the clients. Sometimes though, if the insurance company is not being fair, it's better to go to trial and hold them to their task, you know.
Understand. Okay. Next question we had was this is kind of a general question, but there wasn't a lot of details, so you might have to put some blanks on this one. But how do I know who's liable for my?
Okay, so knowing who is liable for the injury can be interpreted. This question kind of is pretty broad, but I'll attempt to answer it as best as I can. First, we have to make a determination of who is at fault for the accident or the injury. So sometimes we don't know exactly who's at fault, so there has to be an investigation done to determine who's at fault. What parties are involved? What actions did they have? Or what part they in the scenario? And there's a determination of who's at fault. But then the other question to ask with this question is who is liable for the injury is what insurance is involved with the parties that are at fault. So sometimes we know who's at fault, but there's multiple insurance companies that are involved with that at-fault party. So we have to do an investigation to see what policies are potentially out there for compensation. And sometimes there's multiple policies that we could go after. So there's a whole gamut of situations that we need to look at in each case. And any good attorney is going to sit down with their client, go over the facts of the case in detail and interpret those facts, apply it to the law, and then find out what our best method is moving forward.
Okay, all right, makes sense. This question is much more specific. It's a little longer, so bear with me. I fell when walking into a major department store. I own a small company, and they are not going to compensate me for, the insurance company is not going to compensate me for missed sales on my days off. Is this fair?
There is ways of getting compensation for missed work or missed sales, but the important thing to do in this scenario is to keep good records of your missed work because of the injury. So what I always tell clients to do is to keep a journal of how long they're out of work and what times they're out of work and how that's affected them. The other thing that we need to look at is what kind of compensation they would typically get if they were able to work on a regular basis, and compare it to how they are now, how much income they're able to make now. It's easier if they're an employee that makes an hourly wage and their employer can write a note that said that they missed this amount of work, this many hours, and we can do the math that way. Someone who's self-employed, it becomes a little more complicated, and that's why more detailed information needs to be taken down. And so it's a good idea to really make very clear and accurate notes about how much time you're missing, what missed opportunities you've had, and sit down with your attorney and come up with a plan to present that to an insurance company in a way that they will understand and be able to compensate you for it.
Understood. Okay. And last question we had was, I was injured at work and I'm currently receiving workman's compensation. Can I get more than just my workers' compensation?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. When you accept workers' compensation, there are times where that's your only avenue of recovery. So if you're getting the workers' compensation, you won't have other opportunities to get anything else. There are a number of situations, and I don't want to go into specifics because Each case is very different, but there are a number of situations where you actually can bring a personal injury claim aside from your workers' compensation claim. And so you really need to sit down with an attorney and go over the specific facts of the case so that they can evaluate, apply the law, and determine if you have other avenues that you can get compensated. Just another side note there is that there are certain statute of limitations issues that prevent you to bring certain claims beyond a certain amount of time. So if you've been getting workers' compensation for a certain amount of time and want to then bring a personal injury claim, you'll want to act fast because your time may be tolling on that issue.
Okay, all right, well, that's probably some good advice there. With that said, if anyone that's watching this has any additional questions, like I said, you can post them below to the YouTube questions. John will get back to you. If you have an immediate question, you can always just call their office or visit their website. We've provided the link below to his website. And with that said, John, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, Ryan.
We're with John Kelly. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to answer some online questions that some people posted. In addition, these are specifically related to assault. And if you've been assaulted, like the people we're about to list, if you have any questions related to it, you can post this in the comments section below. John's agreed to get back to you with answers. Also, if you have a more pressing situation or concerned or curious about the compensation levels you potentially could receive, you can reach out to John directly, and his contact information is there. With that said, John, let's go to our first question that was posted. The first question was from Daryl. Daryl says, I was in a fight which I did not start. There were no charges filed, but I did get stitches. I was not the aggressor in the fight. Is it possible for me to file a claim against my assailant?
Okay, Daryl does have the possibility of filing a claim against the person who injured him. You can always file a claim against another individual. However, you will have the burden to prove your claim. So we have to kind of look at what it takes to prove an assault charge in Arizona, or assault claim. So the Arizona statute requires that the person intended to harm you, or at least cause you apprehension of that harm. And not only did they intend to harm you, but they did in fact harm you or cause you that apprehension, and that you suffered damages. So with a lot of lawsuits with assault cases, there are some things that we want to find out from our clients before we actually file a lawsuit. So before they do that, it's wise to contact a qualified attorney who can give you some advice regarding whether you can file that claim. Well, we know you can file it, but whether it's going to be a successful claim and whether there's the availability of compensation for you.
Okay, all right, excellent. Next question we have is from Alex. Alex says, I have been assaulted and received injuries from a third party. What steps do I need to be taken to ensure I have a case? And what if the assaulting party has limited funds?
Alex's question is actually a very good one. What are the steps that he needs to do to see if he can get compensation? He first needs to file a police report if he's been assaulted. And this kind of goes back to collecting evidence and making sure that we can document what exactly happened. An investigation needs to be done. And it is actually helpful if the police show up, and actually if they go and give a citation for an assault, a criminal assault, to the other party, can be helpful to his civil case. He needs to take pictures of his injuries and provide witness information to his attorney. He will want to contact an attorney to see if it's worth pursuing after that. So he mentions that the party may have limited funds, and that is actually something that he should consider before filing a lawsuit. So oftentimes an attorney will be able to assess whether the party who assaulted him will have the funds to be able to compensate him for his injuries.
Okay, all right. The last question we had here is from Ben. Ben says, I am being sued civilly. I am being sued civilly for assault, but was not criminally charged. I see you work on a contingency basis, but how does that work in my situation?
Well, he's going to want to actually contact an insurance defense attorney regarding the lawsuit. That insurance defense attorney will probably have a different kind of fee agreement aside from a contingency fee agreement, and we'll be able to see if he has any defenses to the claim and can respond to the lawsuit. So that's something for an insurance defense attorney to look at closely. He can just sit down, do a free consultation with that attorney, and get the information he needs of how to proceed forward.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if anyone watching has any questions for John, you simply post them in the comments below. If you have, again, a personal situation, maybe you don't want to post it online, or you want to reach out to John directly, you feel free to do so. His number's on the video and the contact information. John, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
We're with John Kelly. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to answer some questions related to motorcycle accidents. For the people who posted your questions, we're going to get back to you right in this video. If you've been injured in a motorcycle accident, you can obviously reach out to John directly, but he's also is going to allow people to post their questions in the comment section below. All you have to do is post your comment or your question, and Dave or John will get back to you with his answers. With that said, John, let's go into our first questions. This one was from Steven. Steven says, do motorcycle cases provide any different compensation levels than car accident cases?
Well, that's a good question. In Arizona, the underlying laws for compensation are no different in a truck accident, a car accident, a motorcycle accident. They are all governed by the same laws. Motorcycles do present some different circumstances which actually change the compensation levels we typically see. Motorcycles are less stable, they're less visible, often they're high performance, and coupled with the driver being more exposed to the elements, they typically result in worse injuries. Because the injuries are worse, the amounts of compensation that we see in these cases are typically larger. But other than the amount of injuries, the actual laws that govern these injuries are all the same.
Okay, all right. Next question was from Randy. Randy says, I was hit by a truck while riding my motorcycle. I do have minor injuries, but it was completely his fault. What factors would be considering in determining my compensation?
Well, in any motorcycle accident, there's several factors that your attorney will want to sit down with you and determine before we can start talking about what compensation you would be able to get from it. The minor injuries, you know, is a question, is a subjective answer. So we need to know what he considers minor. You know, are we talking broken bones? Are we talking scraped skin? You know, there's a lot of different injuries that could happen that could be considered somewhat minor. Were the injuries all related to the accident is another question. Was there any pre-existing injuries that were there? Was there any property damage to the motorcycle? Was there any missed work? And then one of the most important question is does he have insurance? And did the person that caused the accident have insurance? So these are all questions that, and there's more, that need to be gone through in detail before we can start determining how we can get to compensation and how much it would be.
Okay, all right. And the final question we have was from Alex. Alex says, I was hit by a truck while riding my motorcycle. Oh, excuse me, that was the wrong one. Alex, I was on I-10 west of town and ended up laying down my bike to avoid hitting a couch on the road. I did spend some time in the hospital. Can I go after anyone for leaving this on the road? Do I have any recourse?
Believe it or not, he likely does have some recourse. First, he needs to make sure that he calls the police and makes a report of the accident. That's one of the most important things that he can do. Because we don't know who left the couch on the road, we would need to look at Alex's own insurance to see if he has uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. So that uninsured motorist coverage comes into play when we have a phantom object or a phantom vehicle that causes the injury. Hopefully he will have that motorist coverage in his own insurance policy. Then he'll need to make a claim with his own insurance company to get him that compensation for his injuries. However, he should still talk to an attorney because he wants to make sure he's making all the necessary claims to his own insurance company, and he's telling them the right information so that he can maximize his compensation.
All right. Well, that was the last question. Again, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section below, or you can reach out to John directly. John, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
Today we're with John Kelly. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to answer some of the questions that were posted online. And for those of you who have posted those questions, you're going to get your answers right now. If alternatively, if you have, or if you're looking for a personal injury attorney, you can feel free to give him a call. Also, John has agreed to answer any of the questions you have directly by just simply posting them on the bottom of this YouTube video. So with that said, John, let me go ahead and start off with some of the questions here. The first question we had. Person asks, I have a work-related lawsuit, and I believe it's a fairly strong case. I would not like my employer to know what I'm considering while pursuing the case. If the case doesn't work out, just in case the case doesn't work out, is this something possible, basically to hide it from your employer?
Okay. There is a certain amount of the case that you could hide. The initial stages of investigation is something that you can consult with an attorney. That attorney can talk to you about what the likelihood of your case being successful is, whether there's some things that the attorney can do to get an investigator working on it, or experts evaluating you for your injury to determine if that's a pursuable case. At some point, it's not going to be a secret, and you can't keep that secret when you want to actually pursue the case in the legal system in that sense. So if you want to actually get a settlement out of the case, or win with a lawsuit further down, that's going to be something that's going to take notification to your employer. Another issue with this is sometimes there's general rules with how soon a person has to notify their employer of an injury that had happened at work. So if we're talking about an injury at work, it's a good idea to notify your employer at least that you had that injury and that you're getting treatment for that. And then I would recommend talking to an attorney right away about at least exploring your possibilities of what kind of case you might have. Not necessarily needing to inform your employer right away that you're pursuing a lawsuit.
Okay, all right. Well, no, that makes total sense. Next question we have is, and I'm sure you get this one all the time, if I win my case, how long will it take to collect my money?
Okay, so there's two ways to win your case in a personal injury case, and I'm assuming one of those ways that people feel like they've won is if they settle out of court. The other way is to actually go to trial and have a jury verdict and have a verdict from the jury, and so those can kind of make the answer to it a little bit different, but generally it should happen within 30 days that you could get your money. And that's there's a lot of other factors. There's attorneys involved on the other side that may need to get you some documentation, a release form. Insurance companies, when we settle, they often have to write a check, and some of these insurance companies are very big, so they have a lot of files that they're dealing with and a lot of checks that they're writing. The other issue is that your attorney will need to put the funds, once they receive those, into a client trust account. And in Arizona, the requirement is that they put that check in an IOLTA account for 10 days at least to make sure that the check clears. So there are some things that prevent you from getting the money immediately, but it generally is around 30 days. It can be longer though.
Okay, all right, and another question. This is probably an extension of that. Well, here's the other one. Will I be able to testify in court? Will I be required to testify in court like in a criminal case, in a personal injury type of case?
Not always, and most of the time you would not need to testify in court. I had talked about earlier about cases settling outside of trial, and there's a good majority of the cases that actually do settle without ever going before a judge. And in this instance, it's likely that you would not have to provide any testimony. Now, that is a separate issue from whether you provide statements to the adverse insurance company or your own insurance company, and those aren't usually settings where you would have to be in front of a judge testifying like people think about as a court setting, but you may have to provide statements. Now, if you go to trial, then you would need to provide your own testimony in most cases, and you would be in front of a judge and a jury, and you would provide your testimony like you see on TV with criminal cases. So it's very unlikely in the typical case. I wouldn't say it's very unlikely, but it's unlikely in the typical case, but it does happen.
Okay. Well, those were the questions that were posted online. We have some other questions that will be asked later on. If you're watching this, and like I said, if you have any questions for John, John's agreed to answer the questions online, so just post them to the comment section, or obviously you can just give John a call. So John, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
We're with John Kelly. John Kelly is a personal injury attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. He's agreed to answer some questions related to slip and fall. If you've been in a situation where you have a case that you think may be important, these questions may help you. With that said, John, let's go into our first question here. How long does it typically take to get my case processed and paid to me?
Thanks, Ryan. Happy to answer that question. When someone is injured, it only seems fair that they be paid for their injury promptly by the insurance company, especially after the case is already settled. Insurance companies, though, they're notorious for taking their time to get out these monetary payments to the clients. And a lot of times what it actually takes is an aggressive attorney to hold their feet to the fire, so to speak. So, in my firm, I make sure I am in contact with the insurance companies. We're calling them, bothering them, making sure that they are sending the settlements out in a reasonable time. Understand that if you're still treating for your injury, we're not going to want to try to settle the claim at times, because we want to know what the extent of the injuries are. So really, that's the initial driver of when the case settles. But once we know what the extent of the injuries are, we put together a demand to the insurance company, and it can get settled pretty quickly from there. So to answer the question, the process shouldn't take long, a couple of weeks after the actual settlement is obtained, before the check is in the client's pocket.
Okay, next question we had is, I fell in a parking lot at a major retailer and twisted my ankle. I went to the hospital and was released later that day. Is it possible I have a claim?
Okay, when you're at a business, any business in Arizona, you're considered an invitee to that business, and it's actually a legal term. So the owner of that business, therefore, has a duty to you, and that duty is to protect you from unreasonable, dangerous conditions that might exist on their property. So we can establish, just like we always do, a claim of liability based on negligence for the hazardous thing that existed at that business. So there are some questions that I would want to ask